Okay, so thank you for having me here. It is the most bizarre experience to sit through like an hour of language you don't understand. So somebody's going to have to tell me at the end what automartiverko is. Somebody's going to have to tell me what that means at some point. I heard that like 10 times. So that's interesting. But yeah, no, thank you for having me. I'm going to be having a conversation with you about how to future-proof your company. I have several experiences that I've now had over the last 5, 6 years working with large organizations and leaders inside those organizations. And future-proofing their companies is a concern that they really have. In fact, when you talk to a lot of leaders, they're really worried about what's going to happen to their companies going forward and how they respond to all the changes that are happening around them. And so you'll see, something like this, like 74% of CEOs are worried that some startup that they don't know is going to come and disrupt their business model. And that's simply because they've seen that happen over and over and over. And what they're really trying to avoid, right, all these leaders are trying to avoid is something like this. So this is a picture of Eastman Kodak Park in Rochester, New York. When Kodak went bankrupt in 2012, I think it was, what actually happened was they had to knock down 40 buildings and 6,000 square feet of space. This is a 120-year-old company that in the end had to knock down their whole entire park, or at least like a large majority of their park. So you don't want to be the CEO that's like in charge of the company managing decline, right? And so people are thinking about how this works and how to actually make this work. So here's some other interesting data for you, right? So how many companies last 10 years, 100 years, and 200 years in proportion to the companies that actually don't survive? All right, so 40,000 out of 1 million companies will last over 10 years. That means that 960,000 companies out of 1 million die within their first 10 years. Right? That's a really, really high mortality rate. Only 45 out of 1 million companies last over 100 years. Only 45. And then 200 years, only 1 out of 1 billion companies will last for 200 years. Right? So it's really, really difficult to future-proof your company. Really, really difficult to future-proof your company because some of the habits that we've developed as we've been running our companies make it hard for us to future-proof our company. And I'm going to talk about what that major habit is. So when a company finds a business model that works, you're a mobile phone company, you're a manufacturing company, you're a technology company. When a company finds a business model that works and they start generating profit, do you know what the company does? They then organize their whole organization, the whole company starts to get organized around delivering this business model. So we have HR organized around delivering this business model. How we hire, how we recruit, how we incentivize, how we promote. All of you in this room work in organizations where you know exactly what your leaders value and how to get ahead and how to outshine your colleagues and all this stuff. So we know all the politics inside our company around delivering to this business model. Our finance, our budgeting, our strategy, everything is organized around delivering the business model that works because we need to make money, we need to pay the bills, we got to pay mortgages and raise our children and send them to school and build some automartiverkos. So, I'm just using that word, I have no idea what it means. So the challenge with this, right, is that every single business model has a life cycle. There's no business model that's ever going to last forever. And we know this, right? We've seen product life cycles before. They've been drawn for us, and we've seen them before. So every business model has a life cycle. So the business model will rise and then decline. Now, the life cycle can be 50 years. It can be 10 years. It can be 20 years. It can be 30 years. It can be 100 years. But every business model has a life cycle. Another thing that we know is that life cycles are getting shorter and shorter. And so, what have you done when you've organized your whole company around a business model that actually works? You've taken the life cycle of the business model and made it the same thing as the life cycle of your company. You've basically chained the life cycle of your company to the life cycle of your business model. As your business model declines, your company also declines. All right? So what do we mean when we say you have to future-proof your company? Management for the 21st century, Management 101, is that you have to uncouple the life cycle of the business model to the life cycle of the company. These two things cannot be the same thing. They have to be different. And so it's the job of managers to make these two things completely different from each other. What you have to imagine is a company that actually lives forever. And underneath that company are different business models that rise and fall over time. That's really what we're working towards, is to make sure that what we're doing is we're managing a portfolio, a collection of business models that balance risk and returns. Every time you hear people talk about how large companies should conduct themselves, they tell large companies that they should act like startups. I think you've heard that before, like act like a startup, act like a startup. Like, no, you don't want to act like a startup. That's not the aspiration. You want to act like a portfolio. That's what you want to do. Because a startup is an institution set up to find a business model that works. So what happens when they find a business model that works? They become you. Right? And they start organizing themselves around their one business model and etc. So you don't want to act like a startup, you want to act like a portfolio. That's really what you want to act like. So you want to be able to manage your current business model and also work on emerging business models. This is really, really fundamental. So that's the philosophical mindset that we take to this work. What we're looking for is to build not a portfolio of products, but a portfolio of business models. I'm going to say that again. Not a portfolio of products, but a portfolio of business models. All of you know Hasbro, the toy company, right? So Hasbro, wonderful toy company, has a great portfolio of products, but not a great portfolio of business models. So when Toys R Us goes bankrupt, because Hasbro has Monopoly and Barbie doll and all of these various toys, but all of them are being delivered using the one business model, when Toys R Us goes bankrupt, then Hasbro starts to suffer in terms of revenue because their one business model has been disrupted by that's just one event. So what you want is to be thinking about a portfolio of business models, not a portfolio of products. There are even organizations that I've worked with that win awards for making apps. It's like, hey, look, this is a really great innovation. They've made an app. It's like an airline that wins an award for making an app that goes on the thing, on the screen, on the seats. It's like, that doesn't really matter if the airline business model is broken. Like, it's just an app on a thing, but they've won an innovation award. So we need to be careful about the things we celebrate. Those behaviors are the behaviors that lead to disruption, even though we think we're actually engaging in innovation. And I tell you all these stories because I want to talk a little bit about the practice of innovation beyond theater. All of us in this room recognize this picture. All of you have a room like this in your companies. Sticky note guys wearing jeans and t-shirts, drinking kale juice, futon. And you've got to have a Mac. You can't be an innovator without a Mac, right? It's like sticky notes. And then what do? Well, we put a lot of value on ideas, right? And so that's why, even though executives worry about innovation, only 6% of them are happy with their company's innovation performance. Because what do? Here's what we do. We have idea competitions, and hackathons, and idea jams, and design sprints. It only takes a week to find a good business model, right? So the guy's doing the sticky note thing. He's got his light bulb ideas. They do the idea competition. They submit their ideas on a platform, and then people vote for the ideas. Or they do a hackathon, and then somebody stands there and does a pitch, and the CEOs are there, and there's beer and pizza. Right? And we're all hanging out, and it's all good and everything. And then there's a winning idea. The guy has won, or the team has won. But guess what they've won? Ding, 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 ding. The chance to write a 35-page business plan. It's like, hold on, wait a minute. What are we doing? Are we doing innovation or are we doing innovation theater? We're not working on things that are transformative for the organizations that we work for. We're busy doing busy things that look like innovation when they're not, right? The fundamental challenge of innovation is not coming up with ideas. The fundamental challenge of innovation is taking those ideas and transforming them into value propositions that resonate with customers, things that deliver value, and then combining those value propositions with sustainably profitable business models. It's really important. And a sustainably profitable business model is basically making stuff people want and then making sure that we get value back into our business from the value that we're giving to the customers. It is the job of the innovator to solve this equation. It is not the job of the innovator to find out where the latest trends in blockchain are going. Right? It is the job of the innovator to figure out how to transform those trends in blockchain into value propositions that resonate with customers and business models that work. That's why the innovation lab is a life cycle of 3 years. Because after 3 years, the CEOs then start asking, you know, we are investing 2 million euros a year in the innovation lab. What has happened in that lab for the last 3 years? And then the innovators in the lab go, we've learned a lot. And the CEO is like, I'm not paying you $6 million for learning. If you want to learn, go to college. We're running a business here. And then the innovators get frustrated. They're like, they don't get it. They don't understand innovation. All these MBAs, they ruin everything. But actually, that's unjust. The whole point of innovation, remember, is to help our company become future-proof by building a portfolio of business models that rise and fall. That's what you're hired to do. You're not hired to have a hackathon. So we need to be thinking about that very, 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 very deeply. Your job is to reduce uncertainty in your ideas by running experiments and testing those ideas. So you run experiments, you reduce uncertainty, you reduce uncertainty. Sometimes you run an experiment and, you find out you were wrong, so uncertainty goes up again. But you really want to run experiments to reduce uncertainty so you can move from idea over there. Is my spotlight working? No, it doesn't matter. From idea over there to revenue moment. That's what we care about, right? That's really, really what we care about. So the fundamental question for innovation, if you're leading innovation, is not how was the hackathon? The fundamental question for innovation is how close are we to finding a business model that works? That's the fundamental question for innovation. And that leads us to 4 questions that we always have to ask for everything that we're working on. 4 questions. All right? The first one is around feasibility. Can this be done? That's what the hackathons are for, right? We always focus on that. Can this be done? But really, what matters is, even if it can be done, should it be done? Does anybody care about this? Can we actually deliver value with it to customers? And if it should be done, can it be done profitably? Right? Can we be done in a way that brings value back into our organization? And if it can be done profitably, can it be done profitably at scale? And people are like, no, we don't really care about scale. Once we find an idea, we're going to give it to the execution people. Right? It's a fundamental myth around what innovators should be doing. So these are the fundamental questions. And if you're interested, we at Strategyzer, we've created a scorecard that assesses how much progress an innovation team is actually making. So if you bring me to your company, just take me to your company at any given moment, give me like 5 of your teams, and I'll put them in a room and I'll sit them down and I'll have a conversation with them. And I'll just put up something like this, in a graphic equalizer. I'm like a DJ. And I'm like, right, I can actually start to tell you how much desirability risks they've solved. So this company, or this team, is really low. They don't know whether what they're making resonates with customers. They don't know that much about whether they can create it. They certainly don't know whether they can make money with it, and they certainly don't know whether they can scale it. Or they know a little bit about whether they can scale it. Maybe they understand the size of the market, or something like that. How many of you can draw this map for the projects that you're working on? How many of you can say the project that I'm working on started here, And then after 3 months of the innovation sprint, they moved the needle. What we mean by moving the needle is reducing risk. So now you know more about what customers want, you know more about the market, and you know more about whether or not you can make profit. And then maybe after the next sprint, you know more. And then maybe you do something and then you know less. But ultimately, you want to get to the point where you've actually found a business model that works. Like if you're leading innovation, this is what you should be looking for. But we're measuring like theater stuff, like how many events we had, how many speakers we had, how many meetups we had, how many tweets and retweets, and how many, oh, these things matter for changing our culture. Yeah, sure. Like, what do you mean change culture? Because the culture of innovation is a culture that produces this kind of data over and over again so we can know what progress that we're making. Right? So that's really, really fundamental in terms of practice. What also matters is not to give teams a lot of money based on their business plan. The deal we make with teams is you reduce risk and we increase the level of investment in your idea in combination to the level of risk that you've reduced. So at the beginning, in early stages, we only spend a little bit of money on those ideas, and we do what we call incremental investing. You reduce risk, we increase investment. You reduce risk, we increase investment until we're ready to scale. Oops, sorry. Doesn't matter. So here's the thing that's happening in your company. In your company, all your innovation projects are in a tunnel, not a funnel. Which means that once the innovation project starts, nobody's going to stop it. Right? Whereas the best way to manage innovation is to use a funnel, where you invest in some ideas, and as they figure out their risk, some of them fail, and then you double down investment on those things that are working until you actually find business models that work. Oh, this is all like fundamental practice that we need. And when we say to our company, we stopped this project because we learned, what we mean is we learned that customers don't want it, there's no market for it, we can't make it, it can't be done profitably, or it can't scale. That's what we mean. Like, we don't mean that we learned stuff. Oh yeah, we learned that blockchain is now important, or we learned that customers are now looking for etc. But we can't figure out a viable business model to make it work. Like, this is really fundamental. It's really fundamental thinking that we have to take with us. Okay. So the real question is your company ready to work in this way? And this is the last part of my talk, which is your company ready to work in the way that I just showed? A portfolio of business models, a portfolio of ideas, with the focus being how close are we to finding a business model that works, and if we fail to do that, we stop projects and we keep doubling down on those projects that are showing revenue, right? So here are a couple of concepts that I would like to kind of think about. I really, really, really love this quote, which is, when a flower fails to bloom, you fix the environment in which it grows, not the flower. Right? It's really, really important for us to think about the environment in which we're building these innovation projects. So grab a pen and paper wherever you are. I just want you to score your company on 1 to 10 every time I put up something, okay? Just like in your mind, on a score of 1 to 10, just do it mentally or physically, it really doesn't matter. So here's how your company becomes innovation ready. First, you need leadership support. Like, if you don't have leadership support, you're dead on day one. I know like people like to call themselves pirates and all that stuff, but pirates used to get hung, right? If they were caught. I even have a book coming out called Pirates in the Navy, and that's really interesting, right? But it's really a challenge because if you don't have leadership support, you're not going to be able to do this in a way that's sustainable. And so what you really need is strategic guidance. So in your company, do leadership provide clear strategic guidance around innovation? The worst statement I've heard an innovation leader say is, my job is to let 1,000 flowers bloom. It's not your job to let 1,000 flowers bloom. Your job is to drive innovation to deliver on your company's strategic goals. Right? So do we have clear strategic guidance from our leadership? And if we don't, it's really difficult to actually scale innovation. Do our leaders ensure that our budgets around innovation are protected in terms of time, resource, and money? And the protected part is the most important part for me. Because you can imagine that there is no venture capitalist in the world that will ever phone a startup that they've invested in and go, hey, startup A, you know that money we gave you last year? Well, we need some of it back because startup B is now doing better than you. And while you're at it, can you please send a couple of your developers to startup B so they can help them finish the project, right? But inside our companies, we do this all the time. We call the innovation project in and go, sorry, we've got this really important thing, so you need to give us back some of that budget, and also can you send a couple of your developers to the, right? And we sort of stifle. So are the budgets protected inside your organization? That's also a fundamental question. The next one is portfolio management. Do we have a portfolio of future-facing business models that we're exploring and testing by making small bets that increase over time? Do we have that inside our organization? Next level, underneath the leadership, is the organization itself. What does our organization look like? Does innovation have an important position on our organizational chart? You know, the thing that happens with people that work on innovation is they're really happy when they get a lab. They're like, yay, we're now far away from the mothership. We're free. We can be as far away from all these meddling MBAs. We're okay now. We can do whatever we want. But they don't have an important position on the organizational chart. Now, as you can tell, I'm from Africa. And in Africa, we have a saying that we use to, when we're dealing with people that we don't really want to deal with, people we don't respect, we tell them, please, go play over there. So an innovation lab is literally being told by your company, please go play over there. We got a business to run here, okay? So if you don't have legitimacy and power inside your organization, it doesn't matter that you have a lab, because eventually the stuff that you work on in the lab will have to have someone important make a decision about whether the stuff gets scaled. So if you don't have legitimacy and power, how do you influence those decisions? Okay? That's really, really important. That's why you need a breach to the core, a way to collaborate with the main organization. Do you have that inside your organization? Do we have a dedicated incentive systems for innovation? I've heard people say that, no, don't worry, innovators don't care about money. What they care about is working on stuff they enjoy. Let's just give them a lab. Great. And that's also problematic. And then you can see that, of all the things I've said here so far, I haven't said anything about tools or training or workshops, which is what we tend to focus on as innovators. That's really at the bottom of the pile, right? That's where we need innovation tools, right? The right tools, business model, lean startup, design thinking, all the right tools, process management, a way to reduce risk and invest in new ideas, and then finally, skills and training. Systematically develop a world-class organization where people are actually trained and know how to use these tools. All these things matter for building an innovation ecosystem, but you can see that the most important things are actually up there. The lean startup training is not enough. I'll say that again. Lean startup training is not enough. Because once you finish lean startup training, you have to go back to your cubicle. And you're still working in the same company you were working on yesterday. Right? So it's really important for us to think about these things in a much deeper way. And so, again, we developed a tool that assesses the innovation readiness of large organizations. It's all free stuff. You can download it and use it. It's all free. You can download it and use it at that sort of link there. You can take a picture. And so the key takeaway from my talk is this. It's not about acting like a startup. It's about building an innovation portfolio. The ultimate goal is to make sure that we're creating value by building all these various business models that kind of rise and fall so that our company can actually be future-proofed. That's what we mean when we say future-proofing the company. So thank you very much for your time and attention. It's been fun. Thank you.